All I knew was I wanted to quit. I knew I had faith. It was a leap of faith that there were tools out there that could help me. But it seemed like there was a saint on one shoulder and or an angel, you could say, and a devil on the other shoulder. Obviously, the devil would tell me to drink, and the saint would tell me to do the right thing. So I had this cognitive dissonance, and I made the saint win all of the skirmishes. I don't know if you could call them battles, but won all of the skirmishes one by one in early recovery for two reasons.
In the art of war, if you don't know yourself and if you don't know the enemy, and you go into a battle or you go into a war with many battles, who do you think's going to win if you don't know your own strengths and weaknesses and you don't know your enemy's strengths and weaknesses? You're going to get slaughtered in that war, most likely. It's preparing people that you have to have a lot of self-knowledge about in your own strengths and weaknesses. You have to have a lot of knowledge on what addiction is, what addiction's strengths and weaknesses are. Addiction has a lot of weaknesses, actually.
Thanks for tuning in to the Elevation Recovery Podcast, your hub for addiction recovery strategies, hosted by Chris Scott and Matt Finch.
Welcome to episode 194 of the Elevation Recovery Podcast. My name's Matt Finch. I'm here with my co-host. Unfortunately, he's back at home in Georgia and Savannah. For those of you that watched or listened to some of our last recent episodes, Chris was visiting in San Diego, California, and we were in person at his hotel on the third floor, videotaping on the balcony. So this is not as cool as that, but it's still awesome. So isn't it cool that we have technology like this nowadays? Back in the 90s, we wouldn't have been able to do this. We would have been on a cordless phone call or not even a cordless, like attached to the wall or something.
Yeah, I don't really remember that. I was talking to a friend recently about it. It's not because you're old. It's because memory is a strange thing. Like, I don't really remember not having an iPhone, which is weird because I used to have an Android years ago. I bet you I wouldn't know how to use it if someone gave me an Android now. I don't recall how I even opened it. And apparently I used to have a flip phone back in the day. I don't remember how I operated that. It's very strange. Like, a friend was literally saying, back in college, we had to go back to our dorms and check our emails for our campus email to figure out where the parties were going on. And then we had to go out and try to find it because we didn't have Google Maps on our phone. And all of that seems very odd to me. So memory is a strange thing, and technology is a cool and scary thing, and potentially incapacitating thing. I don't think I would be able to drive anywhere now without GPS. So it's making us more dependent. But the upside is we get to do this, although it is a lot cooler in person. I do miss being in California. And, I like to go out there as often as I can. And I was saying to you before this particular episode started, that there was one thing I wanted to do, but I didn't get to do. I had an otherwise great trip. But I wanted to kiteboard or kite surf. The distinction, according to someone on Google, so I could be wrong, is apparently that kiteboarding is in a bay without open waves. Kite surfing is on open waves. Either way, you have like a kite that is big enough to lift you off into the air, which is kind of scary and cool. And it's harnessed to you, and you have it almost more like a snowboard contraption in that your feet are strapped in, I believe, but otherwise somewhat like surfing. You're a surfer. You were a very good surfer. I've never surfed in my life. So it was a bit ambitious for me to see someone doing it and then try to get a reservation the very next day. Hopefully next time I call in time to get an actual reservation. It turns out actually that we have kiteboarding lessons in Savannah. So it's probably not, I'm sure it's not as cool as it is out there. Those guys doing it look like paradise. They're just kind of floating, and then they come down slowly and then have a little run where they're going quickly. I'm sure that takes a lot of skill and probably months or years of practice, but I'm always looking for a new adventurous natural high. And I decided right then and there that I was going to learn to kiteboard or kite surf at some point. So the next time I come out, because I do try to come out to California as often as possible, and San Diego in particular, hopefully we have some kind of group kiteboarding or kite surfing lesson. And I'd also said I got a GoPro, which was delivered to my place in Savannah the day after I left for California. So next time I'll be more well equipped. Anyone who follows me on Instagram has probably been disappointed lately because I've been relaxing instead of posting, but that will change. I seem to do that in spurts. but I'm hoping we have some cool GoPro footage, jet ski in Savannah, kiteboarding and kite surfing out in California, and maybe in Savannah as well, skiing during the winter. That's another thing I didn't get to do. I may be looking into going to a different place in the world this summer to ski if I can. We'll see if that actually happens. But yeah, the sense of adventure and getting natural highs is great. I had a great time body surfing with you. I was body surfing about twice a day when I was out in California and going for walks on the beach, sprinting. I did a couple sprints. I try not to sprint every day because it's taxing on the nervous system. But yeah, the salt water therapy, the negative ions, the grounding, the sun. I'm nice and tan now. I just feel more zen. Like I need that reset. And it's also cool, thanks to technology, we can get work done and actually help people while we're on the move.
Yeah. And with technology, one of my favorite quotes, I don't know who it's by, but technology makes a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. I heard it from Brian Tracy, but I know he didn't come up with it. And I have struggled a bunch in the past with being a slave to technology. So it's nice to transcend that as well. And now technology is an asset. And then speaking of technology, in your online course, Total Alcohol Recovery 2.0, when I was in there the other day doing some comment moderations, when you were on the airplane all day and then you drove back. And so I was in there and I had no idea just how many comments that course has. There's like more than 100 pages of comments, and each page of comments is a grip. And there was one particular comment by one of your, I think, new students in that course, but you responded to him in such a cool way. And we're going to make that for our topic today. And this is really cool stuff to me because I don't feel like we've talked about it on here. That's really good because we've talked about a lot of stuff.
Right. Yeah. The subject, if I recall correctly, it's something that you and I might have touched on, but we haven't explicitly tried to grapple with it on the podcast. But it's the question of how much it makes sense to not moralize, but frame yourself as in a particular battle in early recovery to fight. We all hear that surrender is when you stop fighting. I think there's a place for that. But I brought up my particular anecdote was that in early recovery, when I had still yet to discover biochemical repair, or at least the complete program that would change my life by rebalancing my biochemistry. All I knew was I wanted to quit. I knew I had faith. It was a leap of faith that there were tools out there that could help me. But it seemed like there was a saint on one shoulder or an angel, you could say, and a devil on the other shoulder. Mm-hmm. And obviously the devil would tell me to drink and the saint would tell me to do the right thing. So I had this cognitive dissonance, and I made the saint win all of the skirmishes. I don't know if you could call them battles, but won all of the skirmishes one by one in early recovery for two reasons. The first was that I was terrified of what would happen if I relapsed. I was terrified of what that would do to my self-image. I was terrified of going into a horrible withdrawal, having a seizure. So there was fear. And then there was also an immense amount of anger at what alcohol had already done to my life, which made me think, fuck this substance. What the hell? How did I fall from super high performer to, walking around in a medical gown and being essentially locked in my room in a small hospital room after having been given a shot of Ativan. There's people walking around the detox place I was at. Some of them had like swastika tattoos on their calves. I'm like, what the hell? How did I get here? And so there's anger and there was fear. But over time, as I rebalanced my biochemistry, as I forged a new identity for myself, as I accumulated new experiences, positive new experiences, not just without alcohol, but beyond alcohol, I started realizing that devil on my shoulder wasn't some force sent by a malevolent universe to destroy me. That would always be nagging at me. It was actually my inner child, or you could say my id in Freudian terms, in disguise. The inner child just wanted to play. through years of conditioning that inner child with alcohol, the inner child had learned that the way we play is alcohol. So the funny thing is, I still have the inner child who wants to play. The inner child now wants to go kiteboarding or kite surfing. The inner child wants to go skiing. It wants to go jet skiing. It wants adrenaline rushes. Maybe it wants to do some irresponsible things, hang out late at night, be irresponsible in what to me now is irresponsible, but not go on drinking binges, not harm my liver or poison myself. So you always have that. There's a great book that you introduced me to. I think it's called The Great Pain Deception. And it's about TMS, which is, chronic pain that emanates from the mind-body syndrome, I guess is the best way to say it. It emanates from your potentially repressed emotions, which is a whole nother topic. But he goes into, the author, whose name eludes me right now, goes into several long chapters about how the inner child wants to play. And if it's repressed long enough, you can end up with TMS, or that's one of the many factors for people. I think there's something similar going on with addiction, with alcohol cravings. That's why I think it was John Sarno who came up with the TMS hypothesis, said that addiction is a TMS equivalent. But there's something going on there where the inner child wants to play. But in the case of we have our work, we have our ego, our superego, pushing down the inner child, saying, no, we have to go to work. We have to take out the dogs. Then we have to bring, if you have kids, someone has a play recital or whatever, and then you have to go to bed because it's late and you're tired. You never get any time to play. And I can't tell you how many clients I've had for whom alcohol is essentially the playtime, even if they don't frame it like that. It kind of is framed like that in like the wine mom culture. The mommy juice, the wine, that's me time. I've earned it. Clearly something's been earned when you work hard, but alcohol is a particularly bad and insidious way to confine your playtime to, because it is addictive and poisonous, toxic, and all of the other things that could be involved in your personal me time and your inner child playtime gets crowded out by alcohol. Or alcohol just invites itself into all those things. So you do end up doing cool stuff. Maybe you end up going to the beach. You end up going on a vacation. You end up maybe kite surfing and skiing, but you're drunk for all of those things. And that was the case with me too. So I had to rediscover things beyond alcohol, without alcohol first, and then beyond alcohol, and realize how much fun they could be and should be without that toxic substance, and actually even more fun beyond that toxic substance, so that I could give that inner child, which I had, I think, usefully to some degree framed as a devil in early recovery, so I could beat it. I harnessed fear and anger in the very early stages of recovery. But I think the danger of permanently framing a devil on your shoulder for the rest of your life is that you're not going to win if you keep fighting. You need to discover a Zen mode. You need to transcend the substance. And for me, part of that was realizing that I don't live in a malevolent universe. I don't have a permanent disease. I'm not cursed. There isn't someone trying to kill me. I don't have a disease outside doing push-ups, as they say. That would be a scary thing indeed. But rather, there's an inner child that needs to play, that needs to unlearn the alcohol habit and relearn the things that actually feel good. The tough thing for a lot of people is that it's hard to do that if you don't have adequate levels of endorphins or dopamine or serotonin or any of the other neurochemicals or hormones, such as testosterone, particularly if you're a man, in order to enjoy life. So you're stuck in a state of anhedonia, which is pleasure deafness, or you have low-level depression, or you have thyroid imbalance-induced depression, or sleep deprivation, all sorts of things that keep you from accumulating positive experiences. You might accumulate experiences, but everything pales in comparison to alcohol, because alcohol it continues to be the only thing that provides you a temporary, toxic, yet very real, artificial sensation of how good life should feel.
I love it. If you or anyone else, well, actually, I could talk about this stuff with, but most people, I would be deadly afraid if they knew some of the things that were going on in my head, even a few years ago, regarding the inner child that wants to come out and play. there's been some really gnarly stuff. Like, wow, I can't believe I'm having these thoughts of wanting to do something like that, just basically, so you can think about it, just imagine like a life of just lots of pleasure, right? Which is funny because that was my life for many years. I just focused on how I could focus on pleasure, how I could feel as good as possible, as much as possible. So then the first couple of years, that's actually, I developed chronic pain right after I quit opioids and all those other things. And when I started to read those books on chronic pain that you were mentioning, that started to open my eyes to, wow, I had no idea about any of this type of stuff. One of the things that I remember most clearly was in John Sarno's book. And he was saying that when the superego, the parent, the mother or whatever, when it's in control too much and you don't let the id come out and play, for me at least, that was leading to too much responsibility, but very little, like, kind of pacifying thing, very little soothing things for the little kid in me. And so as a result, I had a lot of repressed anger. I got to be responsible, got to be responsible. Remember, I had almost died, from an overdose, almost left a little kid, my little daughter, without a dad for the rest of her life. So after that shit, everything in life, I was like trying to do the responsible right thing. It got so bad eventually that my diet was like 100% good stuff that was on my diet. And if I didn't have something that I could eat, or if I went to a restaurant and there was nothing there, as a result of the super ego out of control, right? I wouldn't even let myself have a little sweet, or I wouldn't even let myself go hang out with friends that were having a fun time because I was working. That was the super ego in control. It was an extreme. Addiction is an extreme, and that super ego was an extreme. However, I needed that at the beginning. I needed that for those first few years. I needed to use my super ego to do the right thing, to, that id, my inner child, Chris, had played and played and played as long as I could remember. So even though it wanted to come back out and play, no, your time's up. My inner child was done. I needed to, at least I think I did. It was really helpful to continue to just make progress, avoiding going back to drugs and alcohol. So of course I had other problems, but I think it was all good how I was doing it. But nowadays, and years ago, actually, it took therapy with the actual, a pain specialist. Oh, what's his name? I'm going to forget his name off the top of my head. If I think of it, I'll bring it up. But he was a really good pain psychologist, and he helped me to realize where I was being just too responsible, just too wanting to do the right thing. So I had to learn how to have fun again in life. I was a robot. I was on the outside, I was successful, but on the inside, I was a robot. I had so many issues. But in early recovery, people will often have like like you were saying, a saint and a devil, or a Jiminy Cricket and a devil. And I remember, like, I'm not going to drink, or I'm not going to get back on opioids. And then all of a sudden, they're just like this obsession, this craving, just like you're saying, man. One voice is telling me, go, go, go. Who cares? No one's going to know. Who cares? But then luckily, I didn't give in to that. Early recovery really is a battle. In the new book that I'm almost done writing the first draft, I write it. One of the chapters is called The Battle of Your Lifetime, or maybe it's called Winning the Battle. But it's about preparing. It's about the art of war. Sun Tzu, I think the author is. In the art of war, it's about, if you don't know yourself and if you don't know the enemy, and you go into a battle, or you go into a war with many battles, who do you think's going to win if you don't know your own strengths and weaknesses, and you don't know your enemy's strengths and weaknesses? You're going to get slaughtered in that war, most likely. And so that's what the chapter is all about. It's preparing people that you have to have a lot of self-knowledge about your own self and your own strengths and weaknesses. You have to have a lot of knowledge on what addiction is, what addiction's strengths and weaknesses are. The addiction has a lot of weaknesses, actually. And so when people go into like acute detox or post-acute withdrawal, if they don't know kind of the timeline, what to expect, how to mitigate symptoms, they're pretty much toast. Even knowing all that stuff, it's still really hard. It really is. Like, I don't think it's a battle. I think it's each day's a battle. And for some people, the war is a 2-week war. For other people, it's a few years of a war. But it's going to constantly test you. And the worse off your brain chemistry is, I think the louder that devil voice is, or, the id, or whatever you want to call it. And the more brain health you have, the more prefrontal cortex optimization, the less midbrain hijacking, the better neurotransmission balances in there. It's just so, but it's not even just the brain, because then if your brain's healthy, but everything else in your life sucks and your job sucks and everything sucks, it's really easy to just say, screw it. So it really is a war. And I really like that way of viewing it. How, and here's how too, the voice telling you the right thing to do is always decisions that are hard, maybe hard in the moment, and maybe it's painful in the moment, but in the long term, it makes your life better. Usually things that make you feel really good right away without any effort or very little effort on your part, those are usually have really bad long-term negative consequences.
I think the key phrase there is without any effort, because there are plenty of things that can make you feel instantly good, but most people aren't willing to do them. Mm-hmm. And these are things that I've learned to love and embrace that I never would have done during my drinking years, because I had alcohol and I didn't realize that alcohol was progressively destroying my brain and my body, making it inevitable that I would get to the point, and I did, where even alcohol wouldn't allow me to feel good anymore because I was so depleted. But nowadays, I really enjoy things like going in cold water. I remember when you and I were at my hotel, we got back. Thank God they had a hot tub that was functioning and they were letting people in there. And there was some lady who had watched us body surf. And I don't know how cold the water was, the ocean. Maybe it was mid 60s, high 60s. It didn't feel horrible to me, but I'm used to going in like 50-degree water in the winter. I've conditioned my body for that. I get pleasure from it. And there was a little bit of a war with that in the beginning, because dumping your body in cold water without an understanding of why it's good for you is not necessarily pleasant. But if you go in cold water and you repeat to yourself, you reframe the situation. My mantra in cold water is cold shock proteins, which doesn't really make sense because I don't think that's what they're called. It's whatever heat shock proteins are. It's some adaptive hormetic response to being in cold water that ends up reducing inflammation and having benefits for you. So anyway, I just say cold shock proteins because that's the best way I can put it. And I know that I have the norepinephrine increasing in my brain, which actually used to cause anxiety for me. I've gotten cold water induced anxiety before, years ago. A lot of anxiety, some anxiety disorders involve high levels of norepinephrine. So now if I feel a little spacey or lightheaded, which for me is an anxiety symptom, I just go, oh, it's the norepinephrine. It'll stabilize soon. And then I feel great. But the cold, hot, going from the ocean into the hot tub and then sometimes back again, that's just, to me, that's pleasure. It's synonymous in my brain, thanks to reframing and biochemical rebalancing and leaving alcohol behind, with, like, I don't know, I guess what most people think of as like Krispy Kremes or something. I'm like, oh yes, cold water and a hot tub. I can go back and forth and feel amazing. And this woman was saying, you guys are so brave for going in that water. And I wanted to say, if I didn't go in that water, I'd just be hanging out on my bed feeling like a couch potato in my hotel room. Like, what the hell else am I going to do? Of course I'm going to go in the water. I'm on vacation in San Diego. So, it does depend a bit on how you frame things. But as for the battle generally that you're talking about, I think it is a good thing to have a battle for a period of time in early recovery. And it helps you prove to yourself what you're made of. But you don't want to be fighting a battle where you don't have the upper hand, where you don't have the tools to win. It's stupid to fight monsters when you don't have battle axes and swords. That's why you equip yourself with the strategies that we talk about and that a lot of other people talk about when going into that battle. And you can emerge stronger. You can emerge victorious. You can emerge with a stronger self-image, more self-efficacy, more confidence. And it can translate into everything else that you do after that, after you win that battle. I often say that transcending alcohol set the stage for me to do anything I wanted. And there was even an aspect of it where to whatever extent I had a near-death experience with alcohol, not necessarily in a particular incident, but just the whole slow crashing freight train, which has ended people's lives before. I felt like I was given a second chance at life. I felt like this time I can take more risks as long as they're smart risks and calculated risks, not the risk that you take when you poison yourself and open yourself up to whatever is in store for you because you've incapacitated yourself, your mind and body. So I was like, you know what? I'm totally going to quit finance. It wasn't for me. I'm not saying everyone should quit finance if they're in it. But I'm going to get back in shape no matter what I have to do that. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to figure out a way to do that. So all of the things that I did after transcending alcohol, all those things make me who I am today. You know, I am the best parts, I hope, and probably some of the worst that we're all still working on. But I am the same person I was when I had an addiction, except that I've hopefully gotten rid of some of the worst elements, especially the alcohol addiction. I've learned a lot. I have more wisdom, and I've added on some new things that came as a result of that pain-induced growth, that battle-induced growth. Without that battle, I wouldn't be who I am today. But at the same time, if I were still fighting that battle, if I still framed it as a battle, if I allowed myself to wake up and think, I'm going to win this war against alcohol today, 7 years after I've drank, I barely remember what it feels like to get drunk. In fact, I don't really. It all seems like a weird dream. But if I were to, frame my life that way, then I think it would be a losing proposition in the long term. There was no need for an enemy after I reached a certain point of progress, but it was useful to have an enemy in the very beginning.
Do you know who the author is? Steven Pressfield?
Yeah. Did he write the book on writing?
The War of Art.
The War of Art. Yeah.
One of his main theories, is that people face something, especially creatives, but pretty much everyone, which he calls resistance. And he says resistance can take many forms: writer's block, alcoholism, binge drinking, depression. These things where we have, maybe someone has a huge goal. I'm going to start this business, or, I'm going to write a book. But then even though they want to do it and they think they can do it, then there's all these problems. They can't stop binge drinking, or they can't stop snorting Percocet, and they're wondering why is this happening? According to Steven Pressfield, he believes that it happens to a lot of people as a form of resistance that our subconscious causes because we're afraid of, going for it, afraid of failure, or afraid of success, or afraid of change. I'm not sure if that's true, but it was true for my life. When I read that book, The War of Art, it was like he wrote it exactly for me back then, when I was dealing with resistance. And this is many years past substance addiction, but I had a lot of other resistance, relationship issues, workaholism, just so many different things. So yeah, there's just these amazing people with these cool ideas. And I like talking about this, the subconscious, psychology, the inner workings of the psyche, and viewing early recovery as a freaking war. Like, when you really think of it, how many problems do you think someone has to face? Minimum, they have to face the brain, the midbrain, the prefrontal cortex, the neurotransmitters. That's like a bare minimum. They got some heavy duty brain work to go. And as you know, most people have many other missing links as well. So it's hard as shit. It's hard as shit for most people. But like you said, being that it's so hard for so many people, the more you prepare, the more and the people that I've worked with that have the highest success rates of quitting are usually the ones that do kind of a long drawn out taper. These are opioid clients, long drawn out taper, because during that taper, it's so much time for them to really get their habits and their life and their routine and their lifestyle in order. Then when they taper right off it, they've built so many new habits and so much health while they're slowly lowering the opioid dosage, that they can usually cruise off it with not too much stuff, versus a client maybe cold turkey detox and they're going through post-acute withdrawal at old age, and they're just, doctor didn't prescribe them any meds and they're going through it. So yeah, a lot of stuff goes into all this.
Yeah, there's a reason I use the term dominate addiction. I like the word dominate. Conquer is also a good one, but it's because a lot of people are in a sort of war in early recovery, and they're gearing up for war when they are preparing to quit. They're getting ready to face, obviously, withdrawal, and hopefully they have methods to rid themselves of the worst symptoms of withdrawal or minimize withdrawal. I'm not saying, by go to war that you need to face it head on without weapons, as we said before. And hopefully it's as comfortable and easy as possible. But embarking on any major life change is going to bring success anxiety, which I think is a variation of what you were talking about, that resistance, the uncertainty that comes with making a change in your core identity. That creates a lot of anxiety. That's situational anxiety. When you add situational anxiety to biochemical anxiety, the anxiety that comes from knocking the alcohol off your GABA receptors and dealing with a brain who's turned the dial down on GABA for a protracted period of time, then you have a potentially tough spot. But that's where these tools come into play. And I've actually been surprised by the number of people who gear up for war. They get scared, they get excited, they do it. And then they get back to me a week or two later and say, wow, that wasn't as hard as I thought. But it's still a good thing that they geared up, that they created a blueprint that was customized to the best of their ability based on their individual biochemical needs to the best of their knowledge, based on things that they like to do, introducing activities back into their lives. And so you can have a personalized recovery program that, is essentially your war blueprint. And that's your battle room. I considered calling the room I'm in here the war room or the battle room against alcohol. But the problem with that is I help other people fight their wars. I'm not at war anymore. So it really is important at a certain point to leave the battle behind, to transcend the addiction, but to learn from it and to grow from it, and to have an improved and strengthened sense of self-image from that experience. And with all that said, there's a lot more that we could talk for probably 6 hours on this topic, and let's save some of it for the next episode because we have to keep this one short and sweet.
We'll do a part 2 on this one. Yeah. And real quick before we go, when you were talking about that last bit, all of a sudden it may not be the battleground or the battle room that you're in, but I see you now as kind of like maybe a military strategist, like the top person in the military or something. And then you're talking to people on the phone, you're making videos and podcasts, and it's like instructing people like, okay, you have a battle or a war in your life. Here's what we learned from our battles. Here's what we're learning right now. And people are like, okay, cool. I like looking at it like that. And, for people listening or watching, if that doesn't sound like a good kind of mental model to use for yourself, then don't use it. There's plenty of other mental models. I think that's probably what it is, a mental model. And mental models and reframes. That's where we'll leave off on part 2, mental models and reframes. Sound good?
Perfect.